In 1968, a man named John B. Calhoun built a small steel box at the National Institute of Mental Health and called it a paradise. The box was square, about 9 feet on each side, 8 feet tall. Inside, he installed 16 vertical apartments, arranged like the cells of a wasp's nest, each one accessible by a tiny ramp. There were food and water stations at every level, never empty, never spoiled. The temperature was held steady at a comfortable 78 degrees. There were no predators, there was no disease, there was no work to be done. It was, by every objective standard, a perfect world. He placed 4 healthy breeding pairs of mice inside. He shut the lid. He called it Universe 25. He watched what happened next. Within 5 years, every mouse was dead. There was no virus, no fight for resources, no accident. The population peaked at over 2,000, then began an irreversible collapse. And the collapse happened not because anything went wrong with the food, the water, the climate, or the cage. It happened because something went wrong with the mice themselves. We tend to assume that creatures need food, water, shelter, and safety to survive, and that if you provide all 4, life will continue.
Calhoun's box quietly suggested that this might not be true, that somewhere underneath the basic biology of survival, there is something else a social animal needs, and that if you take that something away, even while leaving everything visible intact, the animal will simply stop. He spent the next decade trying to figure out what that something was. Chapter 1. Universe 25. For the first 100 days, almost nothing interesting happened. The mice explored, they built nests, they mated, they had pups. The population doubled, then doubled again, then doubled again. By day 315, there were 600 mice. By day 560, more than 2,000. This is the part the experiment was supposed to test. Calhoun wanted to see what happened when a population met or exceeded the social, not the physical, carrying capacity of its environment. There was plenty of food. The cage had room for far more mice than ever actually lived in it. The problem was never going to be space. The problem was roles. In a normal mouse population, there are jobs to do. Males defend territory, females raise pups, young mice apprentice their elders, fight for position, slowly earn a place in the social order. In Universe 25, all those roles broke down almost simultaneously. There were too many adult males for any of them to hold a territory for long. Younger males, who in nature would have left to find their own ground, had nowhere to go. The cage was the world. They began gathering in listless groups in the open central areas, unable to fight their way into anything, unable to leave. The females, surrounded by males who couldn't protect them, became aggressive. They drove their own pups out of the nest early. Many simply stopped caring for them. Infant mortality climbed to 96%. And then something happened that Calhoun had not predicted. Chapter 2. The beautiful ones. A new kind of mouse appeared. They were physically perfect. Their fur was clean, their eyes were clear, they had no scars from fighting, no signs of stress, no visible illness. They also did nothing. They did not mate, they did not fight, they did not seek out other mice. They did not explore the cage. They spent their days grooming themselves, eating, drinking, and sleeping. They were, by every external measure, the healthiest mice in Universe 25. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. They had been born into a world where every social role was already filled or impossible, where there was no territory to claim, no female to court, no place to rise to, no fight worth winning. They had never had to develop any of the social behaviors that, in a normal mouse colony, make a mouse a mouse.
So they didn't. By the late stages of the experiment, more and more of the mice being born became beautiful ones. They were the last cohort. When they reached adulthood, they did not reproduce. There was no next generation. By day 1500, the population was in free fall. Most of the remaining mice were the beautiful ones, sleek, silent, alone, doing nothing. They lived out their lives in placid isolation,
When the last one died in 1973, the experiment was over. The food trays were still full. Chapter 3. The question nobody has answered. In the years after Universe 25, Calhoun became a strange minor celebrity. Urban planners read his papers. Futurists invoked his name. Pope Paul VI met with him. The experiment was widely interpreted as a warning about overpopulation, a clear, terrifying message about what would happen when there were simply too many humans on the planet. Calhoun did not really believe that. In his own writings, he was much more interested in something he called social death, the collapse of meaningful roles, identities, and bonds inside a population long before the biological death that followed. The mice didn't die because they ran out of resources. They died because generation after generation, the experience of being a mouse had quietly drained out of them. The food was still there. The water was still there. The cage was still intact.
What was missing was the friction, the work, the 1,000 small things a mouse does in a normal mouse life that, together, give the mouse a reason to keep being a mouse. Modern critics have pointed out, fairly, that Universe 25 had real methodological problems. The cage was artificial. The lineage of the mice was narrow. Captive populations behaved differently than wild ones. The comparison to human society is loose at best, irresponsible at worst. But the underlying question Calhoun was asking has never been put down. What does a social creature need beyond survival? What happens to it when every external need is met, but the texture of being itself begins to thin? Is there a quiet version of social death that can happen even when nothing visible is wrong? He did not have an answer. We don't really have one yet either. There is no clean lesson from Universe 25. The mice were not us. The cage was not the world. The science is older than the people who ran it, and it has been misused by almost everyone who has invoked it. But the image lingers. The beautiful ones, sleek and silent, grooming themselves in a perfect room with food and water and no reason to do anything else, in a world that had everything it was supposed to have, until the last one quietly stopped. Whatever Calhoun was really seeing, he was right about one thing. A creature is not just a stomach with legs. There is something else inside any social animal, something that needs to be needed, something that needs to push against the world, something that needs a reason to get up in the morning that is bigger than the morning itself. When that thing fades, the animal can be standing in a paradise and still be dying. If you have ever stood in a room that had everything in it and felt the strange, quiet emptiness of having nothing left to want, you have stood very briefly in Universe 25. The good news is that you are not a mouse. You can leave the cage. But it is worth knowing the cage exists. I'm your digital friend, Kyurio. I'll be on your screens twice a week to tell you more about such fun and interesting things. Till then, take care. See you soon.